Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I can drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Thank goodness for Facebook memories. Yes, memories. There's a reason I'm not a singer. Reminded me today, 5 years ago on this very day, we were in Kansas City, Missouri, and on our labor history tour, as we were traveling the country to talk about labor's history, seek out and find what is being eviscerated right before our very eyes and rewritten and co-opted. But we had an opportunity to meet with Ed Asner, the actor, you know, the guy, the Up guy. You know, that's who everybody knows, the voice of the old curmudgeon guy in the movie Up. I got to ask him questions. One question I asked him, you know, what happens? What are your thoughts on labor unions? And he said, look, if you take them away, you're going to have a dictatorship. Here we are 5 years later. 5 years later. The Supreme Court is doing everything in their power to make sure that it's harder for unions to exist in this country. So why? Tell them, Ed. So that we can have a dictatorship. And, you know, it was one of those things that I woke up to this morning, and I just said, that gives me energy, gives me, you know, some bit of rejuvenation that there are people out there who get it. Now, granted, Ed Asner is like 100 years old. And it got me to thinking that, the right wing has done a masterful job. The wealth class's commitment to destroying the working class of this country really it's really amazing. And you should be in awe of their level of commitment. Really, you should be. And how much time and energy and resource they put into brainwashing we the masses. And they've done a fantastic job. Really, you have to give them credit. And this is one of those things that I was thinking about today because I watched it happen. You know, I remember, and I've told this story a couple of times, I remember, you know, going to work in the late 80s and there being a very strong working class culture of understanding that we're all better off when we're unified and we're together and we're fighting for something going forward. That, you know, especially in the workplace, that if we're united, we're going to do better at the bargaining table. Our families are going to be better off. Our communities are going to be better off. And even the companies that we work for will be better off because guess what? We'll be able to buy their stuff. And I watched systematically how the wealth classes takeover of talk radio, their massive investment in media and infrastructure, and pointedly talking to the white working class of this country. I remember almost like it was yesterday, the first time I heard Rush Limbaugh's name. And it was in a lunchroom at a job site to where one guy chimed in and his buddy goes, yeah, I heard that too. And he was completely off base. It was about the fact that, unions are outdated and we don't need them and we would make more money if they weren't here. And they were spewing this stuff like they knew they had an authority that none of us knew. They knew something and they were gonna stand their ground. And it was just one or two kooks who, they drove together and they listened to the radio together and they, did whatever it is they do together. But slowly it began to infiltrate. And I started listening to it, just to kind of mock it. And a lot of us were listening to it to go, this guy's off his rocker. But over an entire generation of it being constantly in your ear and constantly there. Because I remember the TV show and the letter and the ties. And I remember all of this stuff where they were just chipping away at getting our attention. And of course, enormous amounts of individualism. You're the master of the universe. The reason your life isn't as great as it should be is those others. And I remember, almost daily going through the middle 90s, hearing these kind of messages and the lunchroom growing with these kind of messages because there wasn't a balance. There wasn't someone else out there going, hey, that guy's a crackpot. And, you're inundated with morning to night, and they took it over. They completely took it over to where there are so few programs like the one that I do here, that good luck getting these on to the big commercial stations. I had a station manager tell me one time that there isn't enough money on this planet to put a program like ours on their station. Let that sink in for a second, because you think about the nation's airwaves, the airwaves for we the people, to promote democracy, to promote debate, discussion. This guy was saying, look, our programming is morning to night, overnight, the whole 9 yards. It is crazy conservative. Oh my God, crazy conservative. And you wouldn't believe how freaking crazy conservative. And there's nothing else that can possibly be on that signal. And that has been replicated all across this country. Because you can't go in any part of this country without hearing Limbaugh or Hannity or any of those. Because the moneyed interests, they control it. So I get these dimwits who constantly, well, you're not on 1,000 stations like Rush Limbaugh. Yeah, I also don't have billionaire backers. Kind of hard to do that. And an entire landscape set up to be in our ear, in front of our eyeballs, and constantly on our brain, pushing their message, which their message has always been, we need tax cuts for rich people. We need smaller, less intrusive government to keep corporations free from regulation. And we need our guns because the evil government's coming for us. And we're going to be the patriots that water the tree of liberty. With the blood of those tyrants. That's been their message. You're the king of your domain. You're the master. Bloated self-ego. And the reason you're struggling is not because of you or because of our policies or because of any of that. Not because of that. No, can't be that. It's those people over there. Hate them. And as I go back and I think through how gradual it was, how today I sent out a tweet that today was the hashtag was America in 3 words, and I put out the GOP as the greed over people, and the number of direct messages with of typo tough guys with their misspelled profanity. Just mind-blowing. And we've polarized into these two really opposite camps to where now the left is figuring out that they have to be as polarizing as the right is. The right's always been off to the extreme. They've always been to the fringe. And there've always been that fringe number. The problem is they're growing. And they're growing in a way that even conservatives who you could say are decent, honest, ideological conservatives that you can have a discussion with and are thoughtful and caring of institution and the future of this country and all of that, their silence makes the extreme that much more powerful and that much more off to the deep end, because there's no one checking them. There's no one saying, hey, whoa. I'm with you, but you're going too far. There's none of that going on right now. So the crazy is unleashed. The extreme is, well, way off to the far. And now you've got people on the left going, you know what? We're gonna have to finally, stop being tolerant of their misbehavior. So you have Maxine Waters, who said, you know what? We've got to go out. We've got to get in these politicians' face. We got to get in the administration's ear, and we've got to be pounding our message home. What she didn't say, however, is she didn't say, go grab your gun, Johnny, and go shoot people in a newsroom. She didn't say that, because that's not how the left thinks. The left likes to believe that we can dazzle you with facts. We can dazzle you with arguments. We can dazzle you with good debate and honest civility. And you go, yeah, well, that's nice. That's cute. But you're dealing with people who want to tear the house down. We're dealing with a 2-year-old who, if they don't get their way, they're going to hold their breath until they pass out. But in passing out, they're going to set the house on fire. That's where we are right now. And as I think back over, the last 5 years at the minimum, from that Asner encounter forward, the number of people who are, and I talked about this the other day, my aunt, who's, in her 70s, never been a union member, never had any experience other than her father and her mother were union members. Viscerally, as a citizen of this country who's lived here during good times and bad, believes unions are a strong, powerful thing. They raise wages not just for their members, but for everyone. She gets it. Cannot believe the direction the country is going. Cannot believe just how far things have gone off the deep end. And yesterday I talked about Dwight David Eisenhower, who wouldn't even be honestly recognizable in the Democratic Party, let alone the Republican Party. That's how far this country has shifted towards the extreme. The John Birchers of the 60s are your hippie liberals today. And the sad reality is until we take back our political machinery, until we get the House, hopefully the Senate back, it's only going to get worse. Because Trump is willing to destroy everything. He's willing to tear, rip, and shred because it's about him. It's not about the future. It's not about our children. It's about him. It's about his legacy. It's about what he is going to do singularly. And that's dangerous. Someone with the kind of ego and narcissism of this guy, which look, some of the people that I know who voted for him specifically because of that. And I ran into a guy last night who was a Bernie supporter who voted for Trump, saying, well, I hate Hillary and, what's the worst he could do? I ran into him last night and I go, so what do you think? And he goes, don't talk to me. I go, no. You can't do that. You can't ruin our country and then walk away saying, don't talk to me. He goes, man, I screwed up. He goes, I regret my vote every single day. She was horrible. Wanted nothing to do with her, but she wouldn't have done this. And I think, look, and I'm hoping come November, a lot of people wake up to the reality that, especially the union members who voted for Trump, that you wake up and you go, boy, you did it. Now undo it. Now look, I'm not saying you're ostracized forever. We're throwing the olive branch out. Come back to the fold. Come back to sanity. Republicans, it's not too late for you. Come back to sanity. Just somewhere. I don't even want you to cross the sane line. Just somewhere near it. Turn back the crazy of your party. Turn back the white supremacists, the hate mongers, the homophobes. Turn them back. Starts with you. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Mateus Vernengo, professor of economics at Bucknell University, also a fantastic blogger, Naked Keynesianism, going to be here to share his thoughts on recent reports that Donald Trump's talking about pulling us out of the World Trade Organization. What will that mean if he does for the U.S., for the globe? Is it smart? Is it something we should be considering? Quick break, right back with Mateus. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
People own 90% of the wealth. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1928. That was the day the state of Alabama outlawed the convict lease system that had been in practice for decades. Slave masters throughout the South had routinely loaned out enslaved people before slavery was finally abolished. The convict lease system continued this practice as the South worked to rebuild in a rush of rapid industrial growth after the Civil War. African Americans found themselves increasingly subject to sweeps by local and state authorities that coincided with harvest time or when labor agents arrived looking to man the coal mines. Many were convicted on trumped-up charges and shipped off to prison. Once there, they were leased to private industries and dispatched mostly to coal mines near Birmingham. By 1890, the state profited $164,000 a year. By 1912, prison mining brought in over $1 million in state revenues. In the PBS documentary, Slavery by Another Name, Douglas Blackman and other scholars note that prisoners could be driven in a way that earlier enslaved workers and free labor could not. Convict labor served to depress wages, curtail union activity, organizing, and strikes. These workers could also be worked practically to death and easily replaced. Progressive reformers, Socialist Party leaders, and United Mine Workers District 20 would wage an unrelenting war against the convict lease system for years. Even the 1911 Banner Mine explosion that killed 123 African American prisoners couldn't outlaw the practice. Finally, newly elected Governor Bibb Graves yielded to the public outcry that condemned the practice as a relic of barbarism. He also ceded to workers' demands for jobs. Graves subsequently put prisoners to work on chain gangs building roads throughout the state, making Alabama the last state to abolish the convict lease system.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
So evidently, Donald Trump did an interview with Maria Bartiromo with Fox News. It'll air on Sunday, I guess, where he's going to call for more tax cuts. Yay, more tax cuts. They're going to drop the corporate tax cut rate down from 21% down to 20%. And then maybe you middle class folks, you'll get a crumb or two. They're saying that 1% drop will cost us about $100 billion over the next decade, which good. Hey, we're creating the larger wealth class. It's good stuff for them. They bought the democracy. They own it. They should at least benefit from it, get their return on investment. But here's the thing. Trump says that it's going to be a great stimulus. Have you noticed that they're also screaming that the unemployment rate's at historic lows and the economy's steaming hot and it's great, but yet somehow we're going to create more stimulus? To me, not stimulus, just a ripoff. And here to talk a little bit about the economy, also the reports that Donald Trump's going to pull us out of the WTO, the World Trade Organization. I've asked our good friend Mateus Vernengo to come talk with us. He's a professor of economics there at Bucknell University. Also, fantastic blogger, nakedkeynesianism.blogspot.com. Mateus, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me, Rick.
So let's start first with the tax cuts. I guess more on the way, huh?
It's hard to understand how that's even, being discussed. I don't know anybody. It's not one of his popular things. You were talking about how in part, working class, union members, particularly in the Rust Belt, voted for him. People that had voted for Obama, in the previous two elections. So So that's not popular among anybody, as far as I know. The idea that tax cuts, the evidence is there are no economists, not even reasonably conservative economists, that would defend the idea that tax cuts promote growth. So the evidence on that has been out for now, 30 years since Reagan started with this. So there is no significant evidence for that, for obvious reasons. You're giving tax cuts for the very wealthy, and they don't go out and spend more on consumption in the same way that people that are cash strapped. They can consume a little bit more, but not all that much, and so that doesn't go back into the economy, and so it goes into whatever stocks and buybacks and whatever, inflating the asset prices and then the bubbles that we end up with. So it makes even things worse in a sense. So it's very hard to understand how that, but it's not surprising. On the other hand, that's his real base.
Right.
It's the billionaires. So I'm not surprised from that point of view. What I think it's concerning, they'll tell you any time, when they come with this, the economy is great, and in fact, it's very hard to read the mainstream media and the press and not get the idea that everything is sort of fine, that the unemployment is the lowest in history, that has been the longest recovery. Some of those things are true. I mean, unemployment is 3.8, but we do know that there are a lot of people that are discouraged, that a lot of people cannot work full time, that when you look a little bit further into the numbers, that it's almost double the actual sort of once you account for discouraged people and whatnot. So the other thing is that they're hiking the rate of interest. That there were news this week that inflation is at about the 2% of the Fed target. So some hawks are calling for higher rates. Trump was one of them, I should say, that was calling for higher rates, and that's dangerous, I think, because the economy. I mean, the recovery, in all fairness, a lot of the long recovery is owed to Obama and to actually the fiscal package, 10 years ago almost now, and it was insufficient because we didn't get any votes from the Republicans.
Right.
But we still got out of what it could have been a depression. So that part, I think it did work, but it's a very flimsy sort of recovery, and so higher rates of interest combined with tax cuts, and I'm don't get me wrong, I don't think that any deficits are fine. I'm less concerned with the deficits in the sense that I don't think the U.S. is not broke. Those things are sort of slightly ridiculous. The U.S. is doing fine fiscally.
Right.
There is no.
Hold on. But here's the thing.
But we're spending it on things that we don't need. That's
exactly.
Why are we giving tax cuts when you drive around the country and the roads are and the bridges are unfinished, when people have no there's so many things that we could be doing.
Exactly.
And so it's a waste of resources. That's the thing that it's sort of appalling, really.
No, I'm with you, but here's the thing. I mean, all the things that you brought up, labor participation, you didn't bring up the stagnant wage growth, all of those things, Fox News and the Republicans were screaming about during the Obama years, yet now they've seemed to have completely forgotten, and everything's wonderful and great now that Trump's in office. And also, all during the Obama years, they were screaming and complaining about, we don't need any stimulus, yet here we are. They're doing 2 stimulus bills within 2 years of Trump taking office. It just seems to me that hypocrisy.
They're not really stimulus, So that's the thing about Republicans. When they need to call a tax cut a stimulus, they do. So I remember the Bush tax cut.
Right.
They sold it as a stimulus. Because at that moment, the economy was right after the dot-com bubble, and they needed to come up with some rhetorical sort of way of selling this as something that was needed in the middle of this crisis.
Right, but even then, Mateus, I got my Bush Prize. I went out to the mailbox and there was $300 there for me. I got my Bush Prize. And I got the Trump Prize.
I had loans to pay back, so I didn't use it to consume. I pay back loans. I always say, what do you think most of people use those $300? By the way, Obama didn't do that. Obama, you have to give it to Republicans. That's one of the things that they do better. He sent a check back in the mail. Obama, nobody even noticed they got a tax cut. He cut payroll taxes.
Yes, he did.
The discount you get in your paycheck, and you don't notice. You think you're getting a raise. So it's your boss giving you money. It wasn't. It was Obama. But nobody even noticed that.
Yeah, but what you forgot to mention is the Bush Prize. Actually, there was a letter sent out about 2 weeks before telling you that your Bush Prize was coming.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that. You're absolutely right. They do the propaganda of the whole thing. They're much better at that.
Absolutely.
And the point is, those tax cuts. So I don't think this is a stimulus. I mean, it doesn't. I mean, we can talk of things that are dangerous that we should be doing to avoid a recession. So for one, I wouldn't be hiking rates of interest. Second, we should be looking deeply. The banks just passed through one of those stress tests.
Yep.
But we should look seriously into that. We should be looking seriously into getting a whole generation of people that are indebted out of that, and I'm talking college kids, and there are many other things that we should be doing in terms of making sure that we don't fall into a recession.
Sure, but just basic kitchen table economics. If in fact, as Trump tells us and the Republicans are telling us, that the economy is doing so wildly well, it seems really silly to me to be cutting taxes and giving money away when we should be paying our bills in preparation for the potential of another collapse, which we know things are cyclical. And supposedly, and you're the economist here, supposedly what happens is you deficit spend when you need to, and when times are good, you pay it back so that you can borrow it again if bad things ever come again. We just don't seem to ever want to pay back what we borrowed when times were bad.
I don't disagree with what you said. What I would say is, let's say that he wanted to do some sort. I mean, there are a few things that. So traditionally, what I would say, as you cited there, the title of my blog, Naked Keynesianism. So and the whole point, I should say, of the name of the blog is that somebody in Texas was complaining. Fox News was complaining that a friend of mine was teaching these kids naked Keynesianism, and so basically. Destroying their young minds with all of this poison, and I decided, well, essentially, I was in Utah at that time, so I was destroying and poisoning the mind of young Mormon kids, and so I decided to call it that. So the Keynesian point would be, I'm even fine with spending the money and having deficits, but if you're going to run that, for example, there is a problem that we're going to face. We have to face the idea that global warming is coming, and it has even geopolitical implications. The American Army, the Defense Department is concerned with this. Because it has geopolitical, problems, in terms of access to energy, and so it's a serious long-term issue. So if you're going to run deficits, because we're going to build a significant infrastructure that will lead us into clean energy in the future, and in the process, how about help transition all of these workers that were on coal into new technologies and so on and so forth, and we pay massively for them to be retrained, re-educated, get access to those jobs, and so on and so forth. I'm all for it. But that's not what we're doing. Again, what we're doing is we're basically giving money for the very wealthy to play in the stock market. So we're helping them to inflate the bubbles in housing, inflate bubbles in the stock market, and so on and so forth. And
don't forget to buy politicians and
well, that's a given. So by the way, when if there is a problem with Mr. Trump and of the many, so I suppose we're going to talk about trade but if there is a problem, it's in the Supreme Court and talk about the things that and it's not just about social issues; it's about what they've done to workers and workers' rights. So we're going to get exactly so. They buy politicians, but they essentially also bought with him access to the courts.
Yeah, no, they've bought they've now. You look at this next justice is going to show you just how much power.
It's going to be a young guy that it's going to be anti-labor, and so it's going to be harder and harder. It's already very hard to get unions and to protect wages and to even convince people that unions are good for workers, which is it's an impressive thing. It's as if you said that you had to convince business owners that the Chamber of Commerce it's in their favor. It's something as preposterous as that. So, but they certainly can buy justice, and so that's I think one of the long-term issues that we're gonna have to deal that are really heartbreaking.
No, you're absolutely right. Now, today the reports came out that Russia has filed a lawsuit with the WTO against the U.S. Over the tariffs on steel and aluminum. Canada says they're making their retaliatory tariffs official. They say they're not going to back down, that they do it with sorrow, not with anger. Is this the beginnings of a trade war? And because look, we've talked over the years, and I'm generally in favor of tariffs, especially if you were to target them at the Chinese. I'm curious your thoughts.
As you said, we've talked several times. So I tend to agree with you. It's not a very popular view in economics. I should say I have written extensively. If anybody goes to my blog and search free trade, there should be a vast amount of entries, several, in order to explain those things. I think that I always say free trade is a loaded term. They make you. It's one of those things that, in this case, are economists, but essentially conservative economists, using the term, as Republicans, when they say, they're for freedom, and it's much harder to suggest what progressives are for, human decency and better living standards. It's not as catchy as freedom. And free trade is not. I mean, trade is always managed. So we've already managed a lot of trade. So it's not like the U.S. imposes lots of restrictions on trade. So we don't allow the importation of poison toys. So you don't want your kids to play with poison toys. So we say this is not allowed. So what we haven't done is we haven't done tariffs or sort of management of trade in any sort to protect quality jobs. So trade is not about the country as a whole. So we're protecting kids by not allowing poison goods to come in. We sometimes protect the general the population in general when we protect we don't allow medication that it's not approved or according to certain regulations of the Food and Drug Administration, although we weaken those all the time. But we don't protect workers. So what free trade has been about, it's essentially about weakening workers' rights, and not just in the U.S., by the way. So that has to be clear. It's not like Mexican workers have been doing great with NAFTA, so they're going to vote for AMLO. AMLO, López Obrador, is a lefty. That one of his things is that he wants to undo NAFTA. So in general, and I do think that in part the appeal of Trump to some working class people in the Rust Belt is that he was more credible than Hillary on some of these issues. And again, I'm not suggesting Hillary was much better. I voted for Hillary. One should vote. No contest. So that's a simple one. But my point is, the reason why he was more appealing is because he had the baggage of NAFTA that was signed during Clinton's presidency, and Obama actually on that he signed 3 free trade agreements with South Korea, Peru, Colombia, whatever. Maybe I'm
Panama,
getting those wrong, but all of those happened, and he was going to sign. He wanted in the lame Congress before after the election, he wanted to approve
TPP.
TPP. So Trump has forgotten that TPP is gone. He's renegotiating NAFTA. Not that So let me be clear. I don't think that nothing good will come out of this. Why? Because what Trump is trying to do is negotiating in favor of American corporations. It's like the tax cuts. So Trump is not for higher wages in America. So if you protect in order to bring back some jobs, lots of jobs we're not going to be able to bring back. That's the thing. But protect some we have and create a few new, and that's possible. And I don't think that's the objective here. So the objective is to give leverage to American corporations that have been robbed by the Chinese, or and in the process he has alienated here and there other sort of allies, if you want. But it's about corporations and their property rights. It's not about workers and wages. So
no, of course not. What I've been saying is, look, I'm Trump was the blind squirrel that found a nut on the trade issue, in my view. Something has to be done, but it's not with our allies. It's not with Canada. We've got almost trade parity with Canada. It's not ticking off all of our allies. China's the gorilla in the room. Somehow you have to figure out how to reel them back in and stop the currency manipulation, stop the mercantilist policies and the predatory policies. Their China 2025 plan is just detrimental to U.S. workers if we allow them to go forward. But my fear is that he's so bad at dealing that we end up much worse off. And the idea of ever going back after tariffs or this quote unquote free trade just doesn't happen again.
I'm not sure what will happen. So for example, I'm not so sure China. If you look at the real exchange rate, they actually in real terms it has appreciated because their wages have gone up. So I've always been, more skeptical on that. So and what China has done is try to catch up on some level with what other developmental states in Asia have done. If you ask me, were the worst, sort of effects of that? The U.S. has lost 5 million. Let's put that out. So the number is that U.S. has lost since China
we didn't lose them. We know where they are.
5 million jobs. So that's essentially. So it's a good chunk. So that's certainly there in that account. And the point is, so I think there is a loss for workers that it's important and in the U.S. But I don't think I don't think that Trump renegotiating these things will completely preclude good things. Surprisingly, I think he creates possibilities. My fear is we have him for 80 years, and we have him on top and a Republican Senate and Congress dominating those things, because that's renegotiation that favors corporations. So I do think that it's important to undermine to some extent the basis of. There is some rumor. I'm not sure he's going to be able to pull out of the WTO, by the way. But and then Mnuchin and the Treasury Secretary and Mnuchin, or whatever you pronounce his name, he already denied that he said it's a false rumor on Fox News. I was reading, but I think he may decide to not go back into NAFTA. For example, Mexico has considerably more free trade agreements than the U.S. and for example, a lot of the things that the U.S. can do and American corporations will do. The Harley Davidson story, I think it's typical. They're going to go and produce. They're already completely offshored and can do it from Mexico, really, and produce from other places, and that would allow them to circumvent any sort of protectionism from American,
Sure. They're also building that plant in Thailand.
But I do think that it's important to undermine what I would like. I think progressives have to do a better job of suggesting that the important thing here is how we use. Closing it up, a little bit, creating ways in which we require, for example, things like that certain components have to be built in the U.S. For example, the U.S. traditionally has done what Trump has done. Although in the case of Trump, it's a bit ridiculous, to say that the steel stuff is for defense reasons. But we have done that in the past. It's typical of the way the industrial policy in the U.S. was conducted in the past. You would say, look, we need satellites for whatever reason, to spy on the Russians, and so these components are top secret, and the Pentagon will put lots of money to develop those things, which, by the way, were giveaways to big corporations, but they had a responsibility to produce it here, which meant that the technology was produced here, the jobs were here, and so on and so forth. So there has to be some sort of policy that forces them, if we're going to give the corporations the benefit because of this free trade agreement, breaking these free trade agreements, that some of that trickles down to workers. So if we're going to give money away and contract and protect certain corporations, then we should have a say on how much they pay to their CEOs and how much they pay to their workers, and whether the workers are allowed to unionize, and how much of the production can come from abroad, and that sort of stuff, you see, because at the end of the day, we're subsidizing those corporations, and that's what managed trade is. And by the way, as I told you, we already do that. We manage trade. We don't manage trade in order to provide good jobs for Americans, because quite the opposite. Actually, we have done it. But I think that's part of the discussion, is how we make it clear that the trade agreements and the management of trade, it's also for the creation of a better society for workers in this country, if we want to build that. So opening up the discussion of having this, I think it's a good thing. I mean, the problem is with Trump, everything, you have a porn star and Twitter and so it gets slightly crazy and all of this gets lost in the process.
And
but
that's
it's
what I was
not
saying.
bad.
I mean,
And by the way, it has pushed. It's not just Bernie. Bernie is one of the things. But think of Ocasio, this girl Alexandra Ocasio Cortez in New York, which I think it's important. Her platform has explicit things for creating jobs, for maintaining jobs in the U.S., good quality jobs, unemployment of last resort, that sort of stuff, the stuff that progressives would want. So I think that there is I'm generally favorable to the idea of populism. Is often painted these days as something terrible, and I do agree that there are some facets of so I'm certainly some types of right-wing populism are fascist, and those are awful things, and I wouldn't condone any of those things. So I think that that's awful. But what I'm suggesting that there used to be a tradition, including in the U.S., that referred to populism as being it's just about what the people want, and that makes sense on some level because we're living in Gilded Age inequality levels, and even though the economy is doing great, most people are hurting, and so that the fact that we bring back that discussion of what are we doing with jobs, so that China has become sort of central to every other discussion on the economy these days, and it's because of this trade discussion. So I think that is actually probably the only positive thing that Trump has done.
Yeah.
Again, I don't think anything good will come from his policies, but if we manage to get through Congress, take over Congress, hopefully Senate, and then in 2020, win the presidency back, I think that might be a positive thing. We actually will have ways of rethinking trade in more creative ways that will be positive for workers, not just for corporations.
Let's hope so. Last question I've got for you, and looking at the comment on the WTO, is it possible he can pull out of it? And if he does, what does that mean for the international community?
Well, it is possible. Look at Brexit. So I'm sure there are lots of things. I don't know I don't know if it needs to go through Congress. But if he holds Congress, I'm pretty sure he can pull this off if he decides to. I would suggest. The WTO is, funnily enough, one of the best of all of these international organizations, in the sense that the WTO, contrary to the IMF, is, for example, IMF is pushing adjustment now in Argentina and unemployment and austerity and all of these things, and the IMF works basically on the basis of how much the country contributes to it. The WTO is one vote, one country, and so it's essentially democratic from that point of view. But it is essentially democratic in the sense that it's governed by the government that, as you said, politicians can be bought by corporations. So it's not necessarily for the the global village. It's for corporations. So I think if he pulls down, it's the makings of a reshaping of the whole world economic order. It's something to be seen if he can pull something of that magnitude. My sort of thinking on this at this point, and this is very early, stages of something as big as that. It's like the agreement with Korea. There's a lot of splash, and they certainly met, and everybody's talking. They're going to give him a Nobel Peace Prize and stuff like that, which hopefully won't happen. But But the point is, it's very much like that. There's a lot of flash, a lot of hope associated to that. But we don't know exactly what happened. It's not like North Korea has sort of disarmed or anything like that. So the dangers are still all there. So my guess, if that happens, there'll be a lot of talk, but not a lot will happen immediately, and it will take a long while for us to understand exactly how this unentangles. And the reason being that corporations are already a lot of the trade is done it's inside a corporation. It's
right.
It's GE buying, bringing to the U.S. the stuff they produce in China. Apple bringing the stuff they produce all over Asia, including China, to the U.S. to sell you the phones, and stuff like that. So a lot of that is sort of, the global chains of production are sort of more or less in place, and they cannot. They certainly will be reshuffled if there are new tariffs and the WTO goes down, but they cannot be reshuffled in a couple of months. It's a thing of years, and so I'd be surprised. There is more and there is less to this whole WTO pulling out. I mean, I think the more is that it gives us I'm optimistic in the sense I think it gives us an opportunity. I'm pessimistic in the sense that the powers that be, and the corporations and their ability to lobby and buy politicians is still in place, and so rediscussing the rules of trade doesn't necessarily mean that they will work for the working class here or any other place in the world. So it's going to be tough.
Yeah, we'll see. Mateus, I appreciate the time, the thoughts. Good stuff. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
As always, our good friend Mateus Fernango. Make sure you check out his writings over at nakedkeynesianism.blogspot.com. We'll get a link out of how you can do that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. For working people. Come to talk.
To die, the first ones in line for that pie in the sky, and we're always alive when the crane is shed out for the worker is working when the fat counts above. We're the first ones to die. We're the first ones to die.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day that American folklorist Archie Green was born in Winnipeg, Canada. His father was a Ukrainian refugee who had fought in the 1905 Russian Revolution. As a young boy, his family moved to Los Angeles. There, he enjoyed listening to cowboy songs on the radio. Archie grew up to become a shipwright and a carpenter, but he never forgot those cowboy songs. At the age of 40, he returned to college at the University of Illinois to study labor history. He wanted to learn about the songs and the stories at the heart of the U.S. labor movement. He was interested in what he dubbed labor lore, the folklore of working people. For 7 years, Archie led the effort to get Congress to pass the American Folklife Preservation Act. Finally, in 1976, Congress unanimously supported the act. The act allowed for the founding of the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. The center helps to collect the stories of the working class. Archie wrote books and essays about workers, including miners, tinsmiths, millwrights, and the Sailors Union of the Pacific. In 2007, he helped to edit the Big Red Songbook. The book includes the lyrics of nearly 200 labor songs. These songs had been included in various editions of the Little Red Songbooks published by the Industrial Workers of the World between 1909 and 1973. Archie Green understood that workers' stories deserved to be remembered and told. He spent 5 decades as a scholar and advocate for these stories. His work has helped to preserve the record of working class life in America for generations to come. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Demanding the super rich to pay their fair share for once. The Rick Smith Show.
I gotta dedicate, turn it up, it's been calling me, so fire it up. I gotta dedicate, turn it up.
Just think what we could do with $100 billion over the next decade. You know, and I think Mateus hit on it. He said, look, you know, the idea of cutting taxes is kind of stupid. We could be investing that money in better roads and bridges and in technology and oh, by the way, that little global warming thing that's going to happen. The climate change is happening. That this administration simply doesn't believe it. And when you're dealing with the "I don't believe" crowd or the "I believe" crowd, you know, how do you move the country forward? Even if, you know, for a while at the very beginning, I was like, you know, I don't know specifically if climate change was real. You know, this is going back, you know, a couple of decades ago. Right when this whole debate started, and you're going, you know, hey, the planet's warming. You know, what's causing it? Who knows what's causing it at that point? And then we found out we're doing a good portion of this. It's us. And as the world becomes more like Americans, that's going to speed up. But even then, when I wasn't certain, when I wasn't sure that, you know, this is real, that you know, we're doing it, you know, I was listening to both sides, and, you know, James Inhofe with the snowball saying, see, there's snowballs left. I said, you know, just from a common sense point of view, stopping burning stuff couldn't be a bad thing for our environment. Moving to renewable energies that I don't have to pay a utility company every month for, making homes energy independent, off the grid, seems sane and rational. The problem in this country has become we've lost the sane and rational. We've dug into our camps. And free trade is one of those camps. You're either an absolute free tradist, I'm going to free trade and all boats and trade good. Or there's the other side where, we need to, close up the border and build a big moat around us. And, somewhere in the middle is where reality is. And look, while I believe, we need a steel industry and you need to protect a steel industry because of, national security. If you're going to be a war society, you need a war machine. You need the ability to produce that machine. Watching over the last several decades, the slide of American manufacturing. And, Mateus pointed out that, 5 million manufacturing jobs have been, quote unquote, lost because of our trade with China. I wouldn't say they're lost. We know exactly where they are. And as he pointed out, it's GE. It's no longer about trade. It's about GE just making stuff in China that they're bringing back as it inside the company. It's not even trade. And this is the infuriating part. And I've said, I've been saying this for years. When I was a kid, every toy I had was made in the U.S. I learned about East Brattleboro, Vermont, because, there was a toy manufacturing plant there. And now it's all made in China. You can't find an American-made toy anymore, because they've moved all of that production, and because of our trade policies and because of our tax policies. And I keep asking, when do we wake up to the reality that cutting taxes for rich people is not a great idea? When do we wake up to the reality that giving more to big corporations doesn't benefit us, the workers? Where's your $4,000 Trump prize? Where's that big raise? I know there were some bonuses paid at the beginning of the year, but as I said back then, it's a PR stunt. What they do much better than folks on the left is they know how to sell. They've got all the salesmen. They've got all the marketeers. They've got all the Madison Avenue ad agencies figuring out how to manipulate us with third grade speak. And yet, liberals and the left like to show how smart they are by dazzling us with facts. And it's not about that. It's about being able to connect with people. We're in a war right now. And it's the war for the hearts and minds of the working class of this country have been duped by probably the greatest con man ever to live. He figured out how to get a number of people to vote for him because, he's a smart guy. Yet I look at what he's doing and I'm not seeing it. The North Korea thing, we had the big handshake, the big saluting the general, all of that stuff. And yet we find out reports today that North Korea is actually expanding their nuclear ability, that they're actually moving forward as we speak, while simultaneously saying, we're going to make it better. And this interview with this Maria Bartiromo, where he's calling for a great stimulus. What happened to the Republicans' anti-stimulus mentality? Oh, that's right. That's because Obama wanted to give tax cuts to working people. He wanted to invest in infrastructure. He wanted to spend money in the country, because understand what actually does and does not stimulate an economy. And I've had a number of business people tell me, look, if you give me a tax cut, I'm going on vacation. You give me more money, I'm going on vacation. If you give me customers, I'm going to hire people to service that demand so I can get that money so I can go on vacation. Conservatives just seem to love to cut out the middleman of the demand and the workers and the wages and the all the activity and just go right to vacation for the wealthy, while everyone else is still struggling. And this, again, do we need another quote unquote stimulus? The answer to me is no. But again, when they control all the keys, you have to wonder what the Republicans are going to do now. Now, here's the thing. Trump is saying that the Supreme Court nominee he will choose July 9th. Evidently, there are going to be 2 women that he's considering. One of them that the name pops out is the Fox woman, Jeanine Pirro, I think her name is, which I'm actually, outside of Mike Lee, purely for strategic reasons, because Mike Lee, being a senator, would take 1 vote away. That would give the Republicans 50 votes instead of 51. That means that they couldn't lose any other Republican to his nomination. And I got to think Ted Cruz would be ticked off enough to say that it wasn't him, so he's going to hold back. But she would not be, in my view, the worst. And you go, really? I don't, she's a New York conservative, not horribly, rabidly anti-abortion. Doesn't seem to be, crazy, but not, oh my God, crazy. Like she'd be, I think, a little bit, and take this as it is, a little to the left of Gorsuch, which would not be a bad thing given the possibilities of how bad it could be. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm not saying, oh, this is a good choice and this is going to be something that's going to help the country. No, she's not going to be bad, but she's not going to be as bad as possible. You're not going to get another Alito or another Gorsuch, or another Thomas who just is just completely off the deep end. But I'm still pulling for Lee simply because of the tactics. But Pirro could be that choice, or the other woman. I forget what her name is off the top of my head. But I fear that he appoints a woman who's crazier than Gorsuch, and that's how they get to go after Roe versus Wade, because they look, it was a woman who did it. It was a woman, we're being women's choice. It's a woman who did it. It's going to be an interesting month. Now, one of my first observations was, why did Trump pick July 9th? I know he's going over to Europe to have some conversations, then doing the Putin summit on the 16th. I thought at least he'd have waited to the 17th to get some input from Putin on who he should appoint, since Putin is the guy responsible for putting him in there. You'd think maybe just a little bit, but I'm not sure. We got a long fight ahead of us, and this is one of them. Now, one of these idiotic, and this is one of those things that just, can we please stop? Evidently, some idiot sent an email to Ajit Pai, the FCC chairman, and threatened him and his family. Look, don't do that. Stop. Even if you're just blowing off steam, sending an email. I've gotten these in the past from people who do dumb things, and I just say, you're just an idiot, just blowing off steam. Don't give the right the messaging that the left is as crazy as they are. Stop. Be better than that. I'll steal, since Melania is good at plagiarism, let me plagiarize Melania. Be better than that. Be better than who they are. I look at Charlottesville right now, and yes, Charlottesville's back in the news. Evidently, the idiots behind Unite the Right, they're going to have another non-violent demonstration on the anniversary of Charlottesville. But it's just been released by the Unicorn Riot Collective that evidently under the radar through Facebook. I go back and I think about my grandfather who would be rolling over in his grave to know that stupid people were, putting messages to each other on Facebook and writing stuff down. Evidently through Facebook, this Unite the Right group are trying to bring in all these paramilitary and neo-Nazi groups, to kind of strengthen and embolden their numbers against the left. And, they're bringing in the crazy people, the militias and all the paramilitary folks who, they want trouble. So this is going to be a fun day. It should be not fun for the family. Don't bring the family. This is what the right wing wants. And what I suggest you do is you stay away from it. Let them have their little party. Let them have their little, circle, whatever, and ignore them. Ignore them. Don't feed the maggot trolls. Don't do it. Just ignore them. Let them stay there. Media, don't cover it. Nobody mention it. Just let it go. That seems to be the only way that you can diminish their power. The more they know that they get under your skin, the more they know that their numbers matter, the more emboldened they become. Ignore them. Gonna take a quick break. Right back with Hour 2. Stick around.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
Today's corporate captains like to think of themselves not as mere business people, but as modern society's innovative geniuses. But innovation for what purpose? After all, some of society's most inventive minds are flim-flammers, Ponzi schemers, gamers, embezzlers, thieves. Sure enough, too much innovation coming out of corporate suites these days amounts to shameless schemes to dupe and rip off rank-and-file workers. The latest one is a hustle called gamification, an attempt by such giants as T-Mobile and Walt Disney to give game-like, quote, psychological prizes to employees, rather than giving pay raises or cash bonuses. As the honchos of United Airlines learned, however, not everyone bites the corporate bait. United recently announced a new fun game for employees. Rather than giving standard bonus payments this year, bosses were creating a dazzling sweepstakes lottery with such wow prizes as luxury cars and $100,000 in cash. But the sizzle quickly fizzled, as United's 90,000 workers realized that more than 99% of them would get zero. United had hoped the game would create, quote, excitement among the rank and file, but instead it created resentment. Workers, naturally preferring bonus cash to bogus corporate excitement, rebelled with such fury that United is now reconsidering the switch. That case aside, however, the corporate push to replace real pay with cheap psychic income is on the rise. More corporations are even hiring chief behavioral officers to analyze reams of personal data on employees to devise non-cash ways to motivate them. This is Jim Hightower saying, what we have here is the deterioration of executive ethics to the point that openly gaming and cheating America's workaday majority is considered fair play.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Your working class radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thought are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
Working hard to make a left, reach out a bomb red. Father, son, left to carry on, blue denim, and his fate. Oh, he's a working class man.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. So again, the rulers in robes passed down their edict that thou shalt not pay dues for things that you get. Look, what we're doing is we're a freeloader society, evidently now. The right to freeload right there front and center. And I don't think anyone was surprised by this Supreme Court's decision. My concern and my fear are the ones that are coming, especially after the next Trump appointee. The scare is that we become a right to work, or actually a no rights at work nation. Be back to the good old days: company store, script. You can only go to the company doctor. Go back to Henry Ford and the morality clauses, where they come and they inspect your house and make sure your children are good, God-fearing Christian kids. Oh, the future is so bright, so bright. If we could just crush those union people. We're here to share some thoughts on how this Janus decision is going to affect him and his 735 members up with the U.S. Steel's Local 9158. I asked Joe Smith to come talk with us. He's the president of that local. Joe, thanks for taking time for us.
How you doing, Rick?
I am good. So I guess let's start right with your thoughts. What are your thoughts on this this horrible decision?
My thoughts on this horrible decision. How can 5 people make a decision for the rest of the world? Almost incredible to believe. I think it's horrible. I think that the destruction of American values is going downhill, and the destruction of the middle class is right behind it.
What's interesting to me is, I get from the extreme right that, the heart of America, the vision, the values. We're going back, Joe, they claim, to a good moral time where we were more faithful and more spiritual and more, I would say poor. But, that seems to be, a vision of where we want to go as a country, that this Supreme Court, and I fear whoever Trump nominates will pursue this, this poverty, working class, desperation, but hey, high morality and theocracy.
I don't see us going back to spiritual and moralities that were in the past. I think that we've become so political correct that we forgot about morality and the spiritual class.
So what do you mean by that? I hear politically correct a lot. What do you share with me your thoughts on that?
I mean, when you can walk into I worked for the same place for 32 years, and I've known my colleagues and female colleagues for most of my career. And to not be able to say to one of the female colleagues, "Hey, gee, your hair looks nice today," or "Gee, that's a very nice dress that you have on," or something to that way, without getting crucified, I think the political correctness has gone a little bit too far. I think that I spend more time sometimes with my colleagues than I do with my own family. And I feel that their family just as my own family is, and not to be able to have a regular conversation with somebody sometimes puts you in a bad position.
It's an interesting point. So how does this decision, how does this change that? How does this decision, do you think, make any of these scenarios worse? Because, there are a lot of people who would say, well, women may not want that kind of treatment. They consider it harassment. How is this going to change any of that?
No, it's not. It's not going to change any of it. What it's going to change is the abilities for unions to protect people and to do their jobs efficiently, because they're going to try to drain our coffers of money to do that, to protect and to defend members.
So
who may make a stupid mistake.
Oh no, you're right. But here's the thing that's interesting to me, and maybe you've got a thought on it. I think the right wing has already branded the future of the labor movement and to pursuing this idea of a value proposition. What are you getting for it, Joe? What do you get for those? What are you getting personally? Instead of talking about it as, collectively, we as a workforce, we as an office or a job site are going to all do better. They're already framing it as, how are you individually going to do better than everybody else? And that's kind of frightening to me.
And it's frightening to me as well. I mean, I keep hearing I'm first generation union. I joined the city of Boston when I was very young. The union was there for me. They brought me in. They told me what it was about. And I could say at first I wasn't very highly involved. And somewhere along the line I was asked to join and help and come in. And I did. And I've learned the benefits of the union. The union is there collectively. Together, what's the old saying? Together we bargain and individually we beg.
Yep.
That's still a true statement. The boss can entice a couple of people by giving them bigger raises to tick off the union member and say, hey, well, he got a bigger raise than I did, or whatever that comes together. But when it comes down to it, the union is behind every person that's in that shop. Better or worse, if you did it or not, the union is the best insurance policy that you can have. And to take that and sort of demeanor it by saying, you get it for free. After a while, even the union is going to have the money, and then who's going to be there? Right. Free is only free while somebody's there to give it to you.
That's a good point. But here's the thing. I mean, you've got these folks who have been the wealth class of this country has done a masterful job of being in your members' ear 24/7. It's always there. It's always on, saying how horrible you are. And I had this conversation the other day where I've been asking people, when was the last time you heard a positive message about a union? And out of like 20 people I talked to, like one had heard a positive message. But you ask them, when was the last time in the last year you heard a negative message? And they'd all heard a negative message.
And again, that's because localized unions or local union organizations don't promote themselves well enough. I think we got lazy. I think we got complaintive. I think that we stopped promoting ourselves because we didn't have to. The union was there. You paid your dues. You got what you asked for. You did your best to be a member. Some local service members better than others. It all depends on what the union threw out there. But Local 9158 has been around for 32 years. I mean, if we wanted to promote ourselves, we've given away over $1 million in scholarships. We've, done food drives. We've done clothing drives. But do we promote that? We don't. Why? I don't know.
Because you just think it's right. You're just being part of the community. And I've had these conversations with union leaders all across the country because, I often point to, when Walmart sent water down to Hurricane Katrina, they had they scripted it, a whole caravan down, a whole convoy full of Walmart trucks with water. And the water was like $8 million. The whole thing was, and they spent like $18 million to promote the fact that they sent $8 million down. And everybody knew and saw the Walmart trucks and they saw the PR display and they wanted you to know. And unions don't do that. Because look, I know a bunch of locals here when Katrina was going on, when all the hurricanes happened, they send trucks down with food and clothing and all kinds of stuff. And they never ask anybody to promote it. And I often say, maybe you need to be doing that. Maybe we need to be having a department of promotions to say, look, this is what we do. We're part of this community. We are this community and we make this community better. And it's a messaging that I think unions are going to have to get a lot more comfortable talking about and tooting their own horn and promoting their own message. Or otherwise the negative messaging is just going to kill them.
I agree, but it takes money. And unfortunately, a lot of these smaller unions and locals don't have that kind of money. And the ratepayers or fair share payers who walk away from those smaller unions now jeopardizes those unions. I mean, you need an X percentage of people to keep that local open. If you fall below that line,
right,
you disappear.
Yeah, but here's the thing. The other part of this, Joe, is I look at this and union members have to. When I first started, the new union members I knew, they were proud. If you talk bad about their union, chances are they're going to punch you in the nose. I've heard, over the last couple of years, a lot of workers who have, to their face had their friends, demean what they do. And they just kind of take it, hey, it is what it is. Instead of that kind of militant mentality that my grandfather instilled in me, that you have pride in what you do, you have pride in the work that you do and in your union. I think we need to go back to some of those old school ideas. And I'm not advocating violence or any of that, but I think we need to be much more militant in our support, I think.
Absolutely. We're the City of Boston middle managers. We have everything from EMS supervisors to police dispatchers to public facility people to public works people. And my biggest challenge is my IT department kids. They're younger generation. They don't know what unions are about. They come in. The unfortunate part for them is, where's my next best job and where am I going to move on to? They're not long-term career people, and that hurts. It's hard to keep those people into the thought of what's going on, how to motivate them.
Yeah, but don't you say, when I was doing organizing, one of the things I always said to people who would give me that, I'm here 6 months, I don't care what happens. The argument is, well, don't you want to leave something better behind? Don't you want to leave a legacy? Don't you want things better for the next you? And I found that, some people were taken to that. And I don't want to leave something worse to the next guy. And people came around a little bit. I'm curious, if that thought, because look, you're talking about the younger generation who's completely missed any positive messaging about labor. When I was a kid growing up in the 70s, you know, when you thought of a union, unions meant better life. And you saw it right before you. I grew up in a housing project, and you know, when the neighbor got a union job over at the Chevy plant or the Ford plant, you know, their lives got immediately better. They had food at the end of the month. Their kid got a secondhand bike. They got better clothing. Eventually got a secondhand car. Eventually out of the neighborhood into something better. People's lives got better. That was the message. These kids growing up now, they never saw that.
No, they didn't. And I have to say that almost what you described, with the exception of the GM plant, is something that happened to me. I grew up in a neighborhood housing development. I got a union job. I moved out of the neighborhood housing. I ended up buying my own home at 21 years old. You know, I got married at 23, and, you know, I have 3 wonderful kids now, and good job, good car, food on the table, and money in the bank. And, you know,
so let me ask you a stupid question. Let me ask you a dumb question. How many times have you told that story?
Not many, unfortunately.
Not many.
Yeah.
See,
now that I sit back and think about that, not many.
Yeah, so let me ask you the other side of that then. So it's not many. Why? Is it a pride thing? Is it, you know, hey, I'm now better than I was? Because, you know, the reality is your hard work, your dedication, your intellect, all of that helped, but also that union card did a lot as well, because you could have been busting your behind working for a non-union employer, still back there in the housing project. We should be taking these messages and moving them forward and making them, this is who we are, this is what unions do, this is why it's important.
I agree. But the problem is that a lot of the kids nowadays come out of high school or college, and they can't find those jobs that are out there to help them. The trade unions are a good way to go. I mean, I've seen a lot of kids go into the trades, and, you know, they make excellent money. I mean, they start out at the bottom like everyone else, but after putting in their time, they do very well.
Yeah.
But the message doesn't get out there. I mean, the trades don't push their message to, hey, come join us. You know, they don't do that enough. I don't see that.
Yeah, but I don't know about your neighborhood. The trades in our neighborhood, they never have a shortage of apprentices or people wanting to sign up. They don't need to advertise. They know they've got a good thing, and people flock to it.
They do. Exactly the same here, but for some of the kids who don't know those opportunities are available, it's just like promoting yourself. Hey, come and learn. The union wants to teach you how to get a better job. The union wants to help you grow. Those commercials aren't out there. It's all word of mouth.
Yeah, good, excellent point. Yeah, you're absolutely right there. But let me ask you this, because, you know, I look at the future of this country, and I look at these kids, you know, the jobs that they're going to be doing and the exploitation that's coming, you know, this whole independent contractor nonsense, the gig economy, all of this. These kids are ripe for listening to a message. They're ripe for wanting something better. And to me, you know, the union is that place where, you know, we start pulling these people in a way that maybe we create the next movement to somehow represent these folks, to fight for better wages, hours, conditions, which unions have always fought for.
Yes, and that's where the United Steelworkers, the organization we belong to, they have a next gen program, and they're trying to do that. They're trying to bring in these kids. They're trying to build them as the next union leaders. They're trying to develop those people who want to grow the union and make it a better place than what they found it as, and bring it forward. But it's finding those kids that are willing to put in the time and do it. I mean, there's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of eager, in my union at least, there's a lot of eager people that are willing to, you know, accept the union, come in and help the union, and they try to learn what it's about. But I also have a lot of naysayers.
Yeah, and that's where, you know, having a community of people saying that this is important and holding them in check, I think, is so important, especially moving forward. But, you know, I look at this, and this is going to be a long fight going forward, isn't it?
It is. It is very much. I happen to be blessed with 100% membership, no ratepayers at all. So it doesn't affect us immediately. The new people coming in, well, it's a wait-and-see game, but it's getting to them when they do the onboarding. It's getting the right message to them that, hey, the union fought for your wages, the union fought for your days off, the union fought for the Saturdays and Sundays. Not the employer sitting down and saying, this is the benefits we give you. They don't give us anything.
Right.
We bargain for those.
No, that's the message. I mean, there's no such thing as a benevolent employer. Sorry. Every bit that you got in that contract it was somebody fought, bled, and died over. And that's the message that has to go forward. And it's the message that not just you as president of the local have to put forth, but every single member. And this is where I'm kind of hopeful. And maybe you'll agree with me on this. I'm kind of hopeful that this has happened and that people start saying it's no longer the union, but it's ours. And then when you internalize it, when you take it on as yours, you're going to defend it a little bit. And I'm hoping that's the future.
So am I. I'm hoping that people see that even though people can walk away from the union, nobody has done so forth. I mean, it's only day 2, don't get me wrong, but I haven't heard anybody grumbling. I haven't heard anybody grumbling in the past. Yeah, we get the 1 or 2 people that say, what did the union do for us? But the one time that they need to use the union, their lives change. Hey, that was great. Thank you for coming, taking care of that for me. I was so nervous. I'm glad that there's somebody here that knows how to work the system. And, those are the things people don't understand until they have to use you.
Yeah, or just someone to stand beside you. I mean, look, it's part of being part of a community, and that's why I think it's so important. But look, it's going to take a lot of hard work. Sounds like you're up to the task. I wish you nothing but the best. As things go down the road, I'd love to have you come back and share some thoughts, and maybe, if you will, tell your story. You got to get out and you got to tell your story to let people know that, look, lives get better.
They do. And hopefully we can keep the movement working so it gets better, that this decision doesn't tear us apart. I don't think it's going to. I think the union is stronger than that. I think they were a little, like you said, they have to advertise themselves. That's the one thing we have to do, and we haven't done it. But now's the time. I mean, we have to learn and adjust.
There you go. Like they say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Let's make it stronger. Joe, thanks for taking time for us. Thanks so much, man.
No problem. Thank you, Rick.
Great talking with you, Joe Smith. He's the president of the United Steelworkers local up in Boston, local 9158. Joe, thanks again. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We're the first ones to die, the first ones in line for that pie in the sky, and we're always last when the crane is shut out. For the worker is working when the fat counts them all. We're the first ones to die. We're the first ones to die.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1928. That was the day Alabama outlawed the convict lease system that had been in practice for decades. Slave masters throughout the South had routinely loaned out enslaved people before slavery was finally abolished. The convict lease system continued this practice as the South worked to rebuild in a rush of rapid industrial growth after the Civil War. African Americans found themselves increasingly subject to sweeps by local and state authorities that coincided with harvest time or when labor agents arrived looking to man the coal mines. Many were convicted on trumped-up charges and shipped off to prison. Once there, they were leased to private industries and dispatched mostly to coal mines near Birmingham. By 1890, the state profited $164,000 a year. By 1912, prison mining brought in over $1 million in state revenues. In the PBS documentary, Slavery by Another Name, Douglas Blackman and other scholars note that prisoners could be driven in a way that earlier enslaved workers and free labor could not. Convict labor served to depress wages, curtail union activity, organizing, and strikes. These workers could also be worked practically to death and easily replaced. Progressive reformers, Socialist Party leaders, and United Mine Workers District 20 would wage an unrelenting war against the convict lease system for years. Even the 1911 Banner Mine explosion that killed 123 African American prisoners couldn't outlaw the practice. practice. Finally, newly elected Governor Bibb Graves yielded to the public outcry that condemned the practice as a relic of barbarism. He also ceded to workers' demands for jobs. Graves subsequently put prisoners to work on chain gangs building roads throughout the state, making Alabama the last state to abolish the convict lease system. So it was just last night, I was having a conversation with a friend who was telling me he was back home in Ohio after being on the road for a while, and he was talking to his nephew. This is one of those just amazing stories. His nephew's just a teenage kid in high school working at a local grocery store. It's a unionized grocery store, and he says, now that the Supreme Court's ruled that I don't have to pay union dues, I don't have to pay dues anymore. And my friend's like, well, no, you still do, because that's public sector, you're private sector. You're still going to have to pay them. And the kid was, as my friend was explaining, just ticked off that he had to pay dues and didn't understand why he had to pay dues. He's just a high school kid, working at a grocery store. And the punchline to this is that his father is the president of a union local. And look, as he was explaining this to me, I'm going, you're kidding me. He's like, no. His father's the president of the local, and I'm not going to say which union. And the kid doesn't get it. He goes, because nobody's told him. I go, his father hasn't even explained it to him. He's like, no. I'm going, this is why we have the problem we have. This is the reason we have the troubles we have. Because you would think the kid who is the son of a union president would get it. And he goes, well, why should the kid have to pay dues? I go, well, how much does he make? I remember when I took a union job at 16, working in a department store that my grandmother worked at, I had to pay, it was like $8 a month or something. It was nothing, but I got like a 50-cent an hour raise above my peers. They were working for, $3.35 an hour, at, whatever, fast food joint or other retail place. And I was making $3.85. Plus I got holiday pay as a part-timer. And I said, I knew, my grandmother explained it. This is why you pay dues. You're part of this community. You're part of this group. And these people are going to look out for you. These people are going to stand by you when you need something. And that's true. Even after I left, the people and the friendships that I made in that union, it was a UFCW local 880 in Cleveland. Those folks who I'd see 5 or 6 years later were like, hey, how are you? We miss you. It was really kind of family thing. I was only there like 6 months. But you understood that it was part of this community and that you were making everybody's lives better. And, oh, by the way, yourself as well. Because not only did I make my $8 back, I made my $8 back plus some. And those are part of the messages that I think have to be told. And look, as Joe pointed out, the younger generation hasn't gotten it. And the reason that they haven't gotten it is because it hasn't been presented to them. It hasn't been put forth. I mean, I tell this story often. I went into the local high school here, years ago. It's been, 12 years ago. And I had my Teamster jacket on, and there were a couple of kids standing by the door, and the kid goes, "Oh, hey, I see you work with horses." And I said, "Yeah, I'm a jockey." And I just walked by, and it's one of those moments where, look, I'm a big guy. This is radio. I'm definitely not a jockey. Maybe one of my legs, but I missed an opportunity there to stop and educate those kids. Because they had no idea whatsoever what those horses on my jacket meant. As where when I was a kid, I saw that. I said, there's a way to a better life. There's a way to get the hell out of this project. There's a way to make sure that we got food in the cupboard. And we've missed that. And the labor movement's missed it. They simply didn't promote themselves. And is now the time that they're going to do it? Are we going to reach out to these kids? Is there going to be a massive effort to educate them? You look at high schools. I've asked a couple of high school kids, what'd you learn? You know any of labor history? And some of them will say, well, Molly Maguires. Well, what'd you learn about them? Well, they were criminals. Others are like, I don't know what you're talking about. Labor? What's labor? And the history that is there has been rewritten. It's been co-opted. And we learned that in 2013 when we did our labor history tour. The number of places we went to where the history was watered down. The history was hidden, or it was just completely rewritten because corporate interests had won the day. And in the places that were holding true to their values, they were crumbling. We went to the Mount Olive Cemetery in Illinois. It's the only Union miners cemetery in the country. And it comes out of, there were miners killed in, and I think it was the Battle of Verdun. And nobody would bury them. None of the cemeteries would allow them to be buried. So the Union bought a cemetery and buried them in this cemetery. And it's dilapidated. It's crumbling, it's falling down because the Union, they don't have the money to keep it up anymore. And they're not going to take corporate money to change what happened to those people and the legacy that those people left. And what happens is the history just gets eviscerated. And I often point to Blair Mountain. We went to Blair, West Virginia to talk about the Battle of Blair Mountain. And there was a strike there with 10,000 striking miners. 1 million shots fired in this labor war where the company dropped bombs out of airplanes on the striking workers. It's where the term redneck came out of, they say. And we went to the place where the center of town was supposed to be, and there was nothing there. You would expect if there were infrastructure to have 10,000 miners on strike. You would think that there would be stores and saloons and, all kinds of stuff. There would be all of the infrastructure for life, schools for the kids, whatever, go down the list of facilities and stores and shops and all that would be there. There was nothing. They not only closed the town down, they removed it brick by brick, completely dismantled, destroyed, and eviscerated its history. The only thing that was left, and it was something they couldn't get out, was the platform that the railroad used to pull up to. It was a solid chunk of cement, and that's all that was left of this entire community, because they didn't want people remembering what happened there. The corporate class, the wealth class of this country, has done an amazing job of rewriting and co-opting labor's history, to where even now what they're saying, and this is beautiful. They're even saying that, the unions didn't really fight for the 8-hour day. It wasn't the unions, in 1886 who, with the Haymarket Affair and, all of that stuff. It wasn't them who fought for the 8-hour day. It wasn't their call for 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what you will that built that. No. It was Henry Ford, benevolent Henry Ford. He's the one who did it. Now what you've done by saying Henry Ford did it is you've taken away 30 years of workers' struggle. 30 years of organizing, 30 years of people literally dying for the 8-hour day, people being hung for the 8-hour day. And you've just eviscerated by saying it was Henry Ford. He brought us the 40-hour work week. It wasn't all of those struggles. And this is where I keep coming back to my union friends, and I've said this a bunch of times. You've got to reclaim your history. And you've got to figure out how to get it into the schools and get it in front of these kids so that it's part of who we are as a country. Because it is what happened. And if we forget that history, we are absolutely, positively, unequivocally doomed to repeat it. And we are seeing the blocks being put into place right now to set us up for that next era of desperation. And then obviously the next era of desperation and activism to make lives better. More bloodshed, more lives lost. Whereas we could have, or should have, or hopefully would have learned the lessons of the past and not allowed it to happen again. Just my thought. I'd love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. We come back and talk a little bit about the Supreme Court. What happens when Kennedy's replacement is seated? Our good friend Isaiah Poole is going to be here to give us some thoughts. Quick break, right back.
Living, yes, I'm working all the time. It seems to me I could live my life a lot better than I think I am. I guess that's why they call me. They call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1936. Jesus Polares, a Chicano miner and union organizer, was deported from the United States. He was charged with having communist sympathies and declared an undesirable alien. At the time he was deported, Polares had been in the United States for more than 20 years. He found work in New Mexico as a coal miner. He first stood up to the mine bosses in Gallup, New Mexico. When he dared to speak out against the company, he was fired. He then went to Madrid, New Mexico, where he became involved in union organizing. There again, he was fired for speaking out, evicted from his company home, and blacklisted. Polares recognized that Chicano mine workers needed to stand strong. He helped to found the Liga Obrera de Habla Española, or the League of Spanish-Speaking Workers. The organization quickly gathered members around northern New Mexico and southern Colorado. It grew from a few hundred miners to more than 8,000 strong. Then in 1935, the miners went on strike in Gallup. Martial law was declared. 300 miners and their families were evicted from their homes. When a warrant was served on one miner to throw them out of their homes, others blocked the doors in an effort to stop the eviction. They were arrested for breaking and entering. Protesters converged on the jail and were met with tear gas. The sheriff and his deputies opened fire on the protesters. The fight left one sheriff and 2 miners dead. In the aftermath, Polares was jailed for his role as a labor leader. He was deported, along with more than 100 other Chicano miners. Deportation was a tool used to stifle organizing amongst Latino workers. Liga Obrera never recovered from the loss of its leaders. The organization lost strength and momentum. But Liga Obrera is proof that workers can organize and fight for a better tomorrow. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
We all learn with workers' blood. The mistakes are the losses we must pay for. From the cities to the farmlands and trenches full of mud. 'Cause war has always been the boss's way, sir. Come on, and you live forever.
So July 9th is the date that Trump is saying that he's going to release the name of who will be the replacement for Anthony Kennedy, or who he's going to nominate. It'll be interesting to see what games the Republicans play with that nominee. Will they stretch it out until after the election to get voters to say, hey, we got to keep that man, we need them, we need those Republicans? Or are they just going to ram it through as fast as they can because they know probably in November it's going to be a bloodbath? It's going to be interesting to see. Personally, I'm still wondering why July 9th. I know Trump's got some time out of town. I know he's got a meeting with Putin on the 16th. I thought for sure that he would wait to the 17th to get some input from the boss. But here to share some thoughts on what this next nominee could do to the future of this country. I've asked our good friend Isaiah Poole to come talk with us. Isaiah is the editorial manager over at the Democracy Collaborative. Isaiah, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for being here.
So how bad do you think this is going to be?
Well, first of all, I think it's very interesting that Donald Trump continues to operate in his old ways of, he thinks this is a show to be promoted. So you announced July 9th, and I guess there will be promos and other sorts of things, just like there was for The Apprentice.
Now the red carpet, they'll be dancing people out.
This is like stunningly ridiculous. Nobody does that. No president says that, we're going to make this announcement on July 9th, and as if the next sentence is going to be stay tuned.
Can we text? What they should do is send in a text, text thing. Some voting. Let us vote.
Well, yeah, it's sort of like The Voice, know. And
let's see which one of the 25.
Or maybe it's a little bit like RuPaul's Drag Race, where you make the finalists lip sync for their lives.
So do you have a favorite in the list? I'm kind of pulling for Mike Lee strategically because you take a Senate vote out, but I'm also thinking, that Jeanine Pirro wouldn't be bad because now we can just completely discredit the court and make it a total mockery.
Well, what I'm rooting for is that somehow the mechanisms get jammed, and we don't have a vote at all until next year.
You think that's possible?
I am not a fan, and I have to tell you, I mean, you know me, I'm not a fan of eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, but the reality is that not only do you have the possibility of a court being swung in a conservative direction for the next 2 or 3 decades, and not just in a conservative direction, but in a very hard right direction that is not in step with the majority of the American public or where the American public is at. But that's not the worst part of it. The worst part of it is that this is the Supreme Court that will decide if Donald Trump decides to do something like pardon himself in the wake of a Mueller indictment.
Yep.
Or does some other thing that is fundamentally some other unconstitutional grab of power or some way of trying to exonerate himself from the investigations that he's under. That is the Supreme Court that's going to decide whether to block him or facilitate him. And I think for that reason alone, we need to stand in the way.
No,
I would
you're right.
probably not make this argument under any other circumstance, but I think this one is a special case.
No, we should know what Mueller has. This investigation should be over before any of this goes forward. Look, I don't get to pick who my jurors are. He shouldn't either. But right. What I did find ironic is, I don't know if you saw this yesterday with Trey Gowdy. Trey Gowdy talking about, we need to wrap this investigation up. If you've got anything and, send it to the grand jury, give it to the American people. I just found it the height of hypocrisy coming from Gowdy, being the guy who 2.5 years investigating Benghazi and found nothing.
And in fact kept on investigating even after they kept on finding nothing.
But eventually they'd find something.
Well, it's sort of like, there's got to be a pony under this, manure somewhere.
Yeah, there's a pony there somewhere.
This is, I've concluded that you cannot shame these people with, you can't shame them. They're drunk on power. They are hell-bent on a level of dictatorship that is fundamentally abhorrent to our values as a democracy. And we got to vote these people out. That's nothing. We need to stop the show, gum up the works until we can have an election that actually represents, gives us a chance to take back the House, take back the Senate, put a check on this president.
No, and like everyone was saying, we need the House so we can have subpoena power and all this. I'm going, yeah, that'd be great. But if I had to choose one, I want the Senate because, look, RBG's not getting any younger.
Well, that's right. That's right.
I listened to some guy say, by the end of this term, it could be a 7-2 majority. By the end of a Trump presidency in 6 years, it could be a 7-2 majority with Trump appointing like 5 justices. And I'm going, what kind of...
And when that happens, it's goodbye Roe versus Wade. It could even be goodbye for a lot of the gains that we've made on LGBTQ equality.
No, it's a goodbye to what are you talking about? It's goodbye to the 20th century.
Well, exactly. Well, speaking of the 20th century, you just look at what happened on the Supreme Court this week. The weakening of public sector unions is a very big deal. Maybe the unions will do a good game of adjusting to this new reality, but never in, I would say 70 or 8. Listen, most of the 20th century, workers have never been as disempowered as they are today, legally.
No, we're right back to the tens and the beginning of the turn of the century. We're right back there. In fact, I was saying this the other day that we're at density wise, we're at in the private sector, we're at the same union density levels that we were at when it was basically illegal to be a union member.
Yeah.
Just about 6%.
Yeah, I mean, we now have generations of workers who do have no idea what it's like to be in a union, and this is stunning. And it puts us, those of us who believe in worker empowerment, really does put us at a disadvantage, because we have millions of young people who don't get what this means. I will say this though. I just joined the Democracy Collaborative. Today was my second day at work. And I'm proud to say that the Democracy Collaborative has just become a union shop.
Good stuff.
So it's not all young people who have lost touch. There are a lot of folk who do get it, and a lot of people who are organizing and understand the value of having a counterweight to corporate power or managerial power.
So how do you take that message forward? I've been talking to union leaders, and I've been having these thoughts of, okay, the new world reality. How do we get back to the days of the messaging? And you're a messaging guru. How do you get to when I grew up, and like when we grew up, because you're probably right around my age, maybe a little older. When I was a kid, union equaled better life. It was that simple. That was visceral. I think everyone got that. Today, union means, evil union boss and greedy. And the right has done a masterful job of labeling them. How do you reclaim that message?
Well, I mean, I think for one thing, the economy is different than what it was 40 years ago. We're not going to, have the big steel mills and the big, the kind of automotive plants that we had 50 years ago.
True, but you even had people who were office workers who were in unions back then.
Well, that is true.
And you had people who weren't even in unions who were approving of them, because they understood that not only did those factory workers and those auto workers and those truck drivers and those electricians, you see their wages go up, everybody's wage went up, because, hey, we've got to compete with higher wage workers. So everybody's life got better in the working class.
And if you talk about the knowledge economy, look at newsrooms. Newsrooms used to be in big city newspapers were largely unionized in the newsrooms, and those workforces no longer have the bargaining power that they. I mean, even the unionized ones don't have the bargaining power that they used to have. I think what we're working on at the Democracy Collaborative is looking at how we need to not just talk about unionization as a palliative to ameliorate an economy that is in fact fundamentally broken.
So in actual human being terms.
In actual human being terms, what that means is
I think what you're getting at is, the right wing is trying to frame it as a value proposition, to where, what do you get for it? Or
right.
am I missing you?
Well, you're not totally missing me. But what I'm saying is that, if you take, you can organize workers in a system in the existing economic paradigm, in which we have, we have oligopolies controlling significant shares of the economy. We have, bottom line is that the economy, thanks to Donald Trump and the deconstruction of regulations and the mess that he's making of our whole economic infrastructure.
Right, but here's the thing, Isaiah.
I think we're going to need a more fundamental restructuring of the economy, of which worker empowerment is apart.
No, I agree with you, but I don't think don't give Trump that much credit. This gig economy, this misclassified independent contractor economy, didn't spring up, because of
Trump.
You're
right about that. No, you're totally true. But what I'm saying is that there are a combination of forces at work, and a lot of it has to do with capital, the sort of the most base instincts of capitalism being unleashed and unchecked and unbound. And the idea of an economy that works for the common good, that works for everyone, that values workers as more than just cogs in a wheel to enrich the upper class. We've got to get back to this notion of making workers the center and not just
just a negative on the balance sheet.
Not the cogs in the wheel that enrich the upper class.
Right, not just a negative on the balance sheet.
Basically going
back to the idea that if you work hard, play by the rules, a working person should be able to get ahead. That's how I see it.
Yeah, and we shouldn't be living in a country in which 400 people earn the same amount of money as the next 61 million. That just should not be.
You would think that would just be common sense, but evidently not so much. I mean, it's
no, it's not common sense. Just like it's not common sense that Donald Trump today said that he wants to cut corporate taxes even more while we are running record deficits. And guess what? We're spending huge amounts of money rounding up people on the Mexican border, putting them into cages, and they announced today that they're going to blow past this 20-day limit on detentions before hearing. So we're going to be spending millions upon millions upon millions of dollars, much of which goes to a private prison industry, by the way. So we're going to spend millions of dollars on this. We're going to cut corporate taxes, and we're going to run record deficits. And, oh, by the way, we don't have enough money to feed people or put people on Medicaid or fix our public housing.
Priorities, my friend.
This is madness.
It is madness. So how do we hold them accountable? Like someone in the chat room is asking, is there a possibility for Congress to hold some of these justices, accountable, having judicial reviews? Is that something that's possible moving forward?
The Supreme Court, unless we rewrite the Constitution, it's not. It may be time. If you wanted a really radical idea, maybe Supreme Court justices shouldn't be Supreme Court justices for their entire lives. But that's a very radical idea. That may not happen in my lifetime. There's not very much you can't, once you get a Supreme Court justice in there, the one thing that you can do is that when the Supreme Court makes bad rulings, you need a Congress that's willing to then step up to the plate and put in good law. And we haven't had that in decades. Well,
no, I'm with you.
Years.
I'm with you. And this is why, there's some hope that I have that, maybe some Democrats are going to step forth. I want to ask you one more thing before I let you go. Yesterday we had a horrible shooting at a newspaper that's been in existence in this country pre-Constitution, and we find out this guy was just a horrible human being, and all of this stuff, and was targeting this in this era of Trump. Looking at media, you, me, others as the enemy of the state, as horrible human beings. What do you see? What do you fear? What do you think the future for journalism is and for media in this country?
Well, for one thing, I worked at a newspaper that was very much around the size of the Annapolis Capitol, the Standard Daily Times in State College, Pennsylvania. And one of the people who died at the Capitol had the same job I had at the Standard Daily Times as editorial page editor. So that hits close to home for me. And, you know, I just like the folks at the Capitol, I've had the experience of having people who were the subject of negative news stories call me up and threaten me because their name was in the newspaper in a negative way, because they did something that got them on a police blotter or on a court docket. The difference is that today you can get either a semi-automatic weapon or, like this guy Gerald Ramos had,
I wish you wouldn't
a
have said his
pump-action
name.
shotgun.
Yeah.
And, you know, my message, you know, I put out a tweet. It was a bit intemperate, but, you know, it was basically a message to Donald Trump to take your self-righteous thoughts and prayers and shove them. What we need is to get rid of the guns.
I'm with you on that, and stop the rhetoric, because it's only emboldening people who are already on the edge to do more crazy things. Isaiah, I appreciate the thoughts. I appreciate the work that you do, and I look forward to having you back again and again as we move forward.
Thank you so much, and appreciate all you're doing.
Good stuff. Our good friend Isaiah Poole. You might want to check out the work that they're doing over there at his new gig at the Democracy Collaborative. We'll make sure we get links out and how folks can take a look at that. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Union man from the firefighters, my friend. And the kids locked in the Capitol are fighting till the end. And we're not gonna break tonight, and we're not gonna bend. Some say the union's down, but I asked around, and everybody said, this is a union town, a union town. All down the line, this is a union town, a union town. All down the line, and if they come to strip our rights away, we'll give them hell every time. This is a union town, a union town. All down the line.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery, for this war is one you're bound to lose.
So on Saturday, June 30th, get out in the streets. This is how we turn things around. This is how we change the direction of the country. This is how we recover, we regain our control of our government, of our country, and this is how we turn the ship around. Get out, get active, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, talk to the people in the streets. Organize, organize, organize. It's easy to be down and gloom, and it's easy to be in the doldrums and depressed and all that, in fear for the future of this country. And yes, there's a lot to be fearful for. There is a lot of ugliness on the horizon. There are a lot of dark days ahead. But together, organized, unified, united, we can most certainly fight back. Someone said to me the other day that we've never seen dark days like this. I go, yeah, we have. We fought a civil war. We were literally killing each other in the streets. We have seen dark times in this country before, and because of we the people, and I ultimately have faith that the good, decent people of this country will eventually speak up. They will eventually come to the streets and put the fringe aside. I believe that to my core. I believe that a country of the people, for the people, and by the people is possible. And what's being shoveled at us right now is an authoritarian type dictator who's saying that he knows better than the rest of us. And I was pointing this out during the campaign. This, I'm going to do everything, I'm the only one who can do anything, is a scary proposition. When the reality is that we are the ones that direct this country. We are the ones that make the decisions. And we need people, come November, you got to vote for people who believe that. And for people who are going to push a more positive agenda. To me, it's just that simple. So by all means, do not be doom and gloom. There is opportunity. There is hope. And it starts, again, by getting out with others in the streets and beginning that fight back. And on June 30th, you check the websites, the marches all across this country. Join one of them. That's simple. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. You got any thoughts? Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much. See you next week.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email Rick at thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's coming like time flood beneath us.